Hey, welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to peel back those labels you hear all the time, introvert and extrovert. We're going way beyond the stereotypes to look at the actual science of who you are based on, how your brain is actually wired.
So let me ask you something. Do you ever feel like those labels just don't quite fit? Like you're an introvert who secretly loves a good party. Or maybe you're an extrovert who absolutely needs some quiet time to recharge. Well, if that's you, you are definitely not alone. It turns out, the way we usually talk about this stuff, it kind of misses the real, much more fascinating story that's happening inside our heads.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll ask if you're an introvert, extrovert, or maybe both. Then we'll rewind to Jung's original big idea. After that, we'll look at your brain on introversion, the biology of it all. We'll clear up a huge mix-up between being shy and being introverted, and finally, we'll see how all of this connects to creativity.
Okay, let's dive right into our first section. We're moving beyond the labels and really challenging that simple idea that you have to be one or the other.
The thing is, most of us aren't purely one or the other. It's not like a switch that's either on or off. It's really more of a spectrum. And right there in the middle, you've got people we call ambiverts. Where you land on that spectrum can even change throughout your life or, depending on the situation you're in.
So, to really get a grip on this whole spectrum idea, we've got to go back in time. We're headed to the 1920s to see what the psychologist Carl Jung was really talking about when he first came up with these terms.
Okay, first things first, we need to clear something up. When Jung talked about libido, he did not mean what Freud meant. It wasn't about sexual energy. For Jung, libido was this big, broad life force, the psychic energy that powers our minds. And he said it can flow in one of two directions, inwards or outwards.
And that energy is constantly being pulled between two different poles. On one side, you've got the subject. That's your inner world, right? Your thoughts, your feelings. And on the other side, you have the object. That's literally everything else. Other people, things, the world around you. And right here, you can see the huge difference between what Jung meant and how we talk about it today. For Jung, it was never about just being shy or outgoing. It was about your fundamental motivation. Are you driven more by your internal world? That's introversion. Or are you pulled more by the external world? That's extroversion. Our whole modern idea of recharging by being alone or with people, it's really just a simplified version of this much deeper idea. All right, so with that historical foundation laid, let's get into the really cool stuff, the hard science. Because it turns out these tendencies aren't just in your head, psychologically speaking. They have a very real biological blueprint in your brain.
Yeah, this isn't just a choice or a preference, it is literally your brain's wiring. Modern science completely backs this up. These traits are tied directly to our neurochemistry, to the actual structure of our brains. So it's less about how you choose to be and a lot more about how you're hardwired to respond to the world.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. It all boils down to two different chemical superhighways in the brain. For extroverts, it's all about the dopamine pathway. Dopamine is that reward chemical, right? It pushes them toward new things, excitement, action. But introverts, they run more on the acetylcholine pathway. That's a totally different system linked to calm, deep focus and reflection. It even uses longer, more complex routes through the brain. And what's crazy is we can actually see this happening. Brain scans, specifically PET scans, show that introverts have more blood flowing to their frontal lobes. That's the part of your brain that does planning and handles all that internal self-talk. Extroverts, on the other hand, light up in areas like the temporal lobes, which are all about processing sensory data, what you're seeing, hearing, and feeling in the moment.
Okay, so this brain science is absolutely crucial because it helps us untangle one of the biggest and most important mix-ups out there, the difference between being an introvert and being shy or socially anxious. They are not the same thing.
So let's break this down because it's super important. Introversion is a personality trait. It's about how you manage your energy. Shyness, that's more of a behavior. It's driven by a fear of what other people think. And then you have social anxiety, which is a recognized mental health condition. That's about an intense, overwhelming fear of being humiliated or rejected in social settings.
This quote just nails the difference perfectly. An introvert chooses to stay home to recharge. A socially anxious person feels forced to stay home to avoid fear. See the difference? One is about choice and restoration. The other is about compulsion and avoiding distress. It's a world of difference. All right, now that we've made that critical distinction between personality and fear, let's explore something really cool, the connection between how you're wired and your creative genius.
So when researchers look at personality and creativity, they find a few key things. First, the trait called openness is the #1 predictor of creativity, period. But here's where it gets interesting. For extroverts, their creativity really gets unlocked when they have what's called a high learning goal orientation. Basically, they're super motivated to learn and achieve. But for introverts, it's the opposite. Their creativity really shines when that external pressure to achieve is low, because it gives them the space for that deep, quiet, solitary work.
And this quote from Cole Schaefer really brings it home. He says, much of creative work requires both solitude and deep focus. An introvert who feels most energized by themselves might find it easier to carve out time. It perfectly illustrates how an introvert's natural tendency isn't a weakness. It can actually be a creative superpower.
All right, so let's boil all of this down to what you should take away. Number 1, it's a spectrum, not a simple label. You're a unique mix. Number 2, it's biological. Your brain is just wired for a certain amount of stimulation. 3, it's all about your energy, not about your social skills or how confident you are. And finally, number 4, and this is the most important one, use this knowledge. Design your life to work with your natural wiring, not against it.
And that really brings us to our final question for you. Now that you know a little more about your brain's wiring, how might you design your life differently? Because understanding this stuff isn't about fitting yourself into a box. It's about giving yourself permission to build a life that actually works for you. So what are you going to do with that knowledge?